Like we are live. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you all for taking some time here in the middle of your day to come and join Climatize's webinar. We're really pleased to welcome some of the project developers who have been raising capital through the Climatize platform to, speak to the renewable energy projects that they have been developing, share more about their work, and then also kind of speak to how catalytic, the investments through Climatize has been for them. So we can give it, just another minute or two here to let people continue to funnel in. Well, Josh, why don't you want to take us to the next slide and we'll begin moving through this with everybody. Okay, so as an overview, if you are not familiar with Climatize yet, we are an investment platform that enables you to invest directly into clean energy projects with as little as $10. There are no investor fees on the platform, and you can earn anywhere from 8 to 10% by investing in these clean energy projects. It is a fixed rate debt product that then ultimately pays out based on specific milestones of project completion or based on the contracted cash flows. So I encourage you to go and do your own research on any project. The Form C, which is the SEC filing, is available on the financial tab of each project in the Climatize app. So please do go review that, and that will give you everything you could possibly wonder about each and every project. Okay, thanks, Josh. So as we briefly touched on in our last webinar, really looking at this massive clean energy opportunity that's materializing thanks to catalytic funding, both through the federal government, technologies maturing to ultimately bring those cost curves down. Between 2010 and 2019, the cost of solar dropped by 95%. And because of that, we're seeing a very rapid development of the distributed solar market here in the US in particular. I come from a background of 10 years in renewable energy engineering and 2 master's degrees in the space. I've worked in engineering, procurement, and construction, as well as power market analysis and project management. So I've seen really firsthand how these projects are materializing in communities across the country, as well as some of the funding challenges that those projects that are small to medium scale really face. Despite the benefits to those communities, small to medium scale projects often struggle to attract financing. They're not large enough for the traditional Wall Street funders, while meanwhile the economics or the technology is often not familiar for community lenders. And so through Climatize, we're helping provide some of that catalytic capital to bring these small to medium scale projects to life. So Josh, you want to jump to the next slide? So one thing I do have to reiterate is that, this webinar is really purely for informational purposes only. It's not a solicitation to opt to purchase any securities. So please do any of your research beforehand. And obviously all investments come with risk. So we're looking now briefly, kind of looking at the market opportunity again. S&P's recent clean energy commodities report projects $5.6 trillion being allocated towards clean energy projects by the end of the decade. This has been really spurred on by that catalytic funding from the Inflation Reduction Act. I believe that was $369 billion, particularly focused on tax credits. Now you can see that solar is really going to be eating up the bulk of that funding volume over the coming decade. And so we're looking at, roughly $2.8 trillion being invested in both distributed solar and utility scale solar. So the developers on this call have done projects across this whole spectrum, ranging from utility scale down to small sub 10 megawatt projects. I know Brian Kuhn here has even done some wind projects throughout his track record. Brian is coming in with at least 40 years of experience and is one of the industry experts on the topic. Larry with Associate Energy Developers as well has really been focused on, both distributed solar, commercial, industrial, and community solar. And now Lester here with Ovanova is really doing a lot of both solar and battery storage projects. And so I'll let them each speak to their respective specialties in the coming slides. So Lester, do you want to quickly introduce yourself to the webinar here?
Yeah, my name's Lester Crampton, co-founder of Ovanova, farm boy from West Tennessee, currently home taking care of my folks. And we started out, looks like a lot of words on here about me, and it's all overrated stuff. We really believe in our mission, which is to add as much value as possible to as many lives as possible. We started out working with churches and schools and nonprofits as a way to give their supporters a way to learn about solar energy and raise funds for the organization without having to buy anything. And that led us to a really particular path where all of a sudden we had customers from all over the country. And we learned that solar is not the same everywhere. Every utility company is different. Every regulation is different. But one thing that hasn't changed, no matter where we go, is that for whatever reason, most utility companies have an antagonistic relationship with solar companies because it's like, oh, you're taking a customer from us. One thing we found is we have included battery storage with all of our projects. We don't do solar without batteries now, is that utility companies really come around. This was the first part about us that Josh is talking about, where we held events virtually where people could send like supporters of a basketball team or a cheerleading group or a gay men's choir. We've worked with everybody. Their supporters show up and they learn about solar. We make a donation. And so we can go to the next slide, Josh. What we're up to now, and I'll get back to the battery things. We've developed a bunch of projects. We, I guess, didn't get the pictures in time of some pretty ones that we've done with Climatize, but you can go to the next page. And so this is how Climatize has helped us. At the beginning of last year, the Inflation Reduction Act became law, and it changed three things that really created an incredible opportunity. One is there's a particular grant for farmers and small businesses in forgotten communities, the kind of communities whose jobs went away 30 years ago, the kind of communities where I'm from, and I had to go away and live in New York and LA in order to put something together that was worth bringing back home to our communities. But what's true in our communities right now is a lot of folks qualify for a grant that pays for 50% of their project. What's also true in these communities, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, is that they can have 50 to 60% tax credit, 70 depending on the type of building. And I'm sure some of the community solar guys will talk about that. But there are some tremendous opportunities that if you pile things on top of each other, it essentially works out to be free solar for these people if, and that's a big if they can pay for it first. And so when you're talking to a farmer, even if he's going to get the entire cost of a project back 6 months after he or she finances it, they don't want $2 million on their debt to income ratio because they might need to buy a cotton picker. You know, something might come up because they don't really trust solar yet, because these are the places that the government forgot. And anything from the government, it takes a higher level of trust to reach the people in these communities. And we've been blessed to be able to reach these folks and present them with opportunity. And because of Climatize, we've been able to find a way for them to be able to finance projects that we can then complete because of the financing from Climatize in a way that gives them exactly what they want to make these projects available. So because of what Climatize has been able to help us prove, we have about right at $90 to $100 million worth of projects in the pipeline right now, from places that you would have never expected anybody to go solar, much less go solar with batteries. So to bring this full circle and not monopolize the entire time today. We're not just developing some solar projects that knock some dollars off electricity bills and keep some carbon out of the atmosphere, although those are all wonderful things. The grid out here in the country, it's not that great. You know, power still goes out. You know, when we get a lot of messages that says, hey, stop using your electricity, you know, people aren't used to that. In California, I know that y'all are used to rolling blackouts, but here people are used to having the power they need, but that power shortage is coming here. And everybody on this call is doing a great job with generation. But with the batteries that we're putting online in these systems, there's significant size storage, half a megawatt hour of storage, which are going to allow us to participate in VPP programs that we're creating. So in short, Climatize has allowed the Inflation Reduction Act to actually be useful for the audience it was intended to be useful for. And it's allowed us to create state-of-the-art installations that will really support the grid and bring hope to the communities where there would not have been solar here for another 10, 15, 20 years. So that's what having a financing partner who's creative and bold and intelligent enough to recognize opportunity has opened up for us. So thank you, Will and Alba. If you're a developer or an investor, I couldn't recommend Climatize more highly, but I don't want to take up a bunch of time talking about myself. We've installed in 20 states, 60 different utility companies, and here's some of our projects. You know, this is up and running. The Howl Farms, I can show you a little video of that if you guys get bored. There's of taking it, wiring it up in a way where the chickens never run out of power. That Farmer's Hardware, that's in my hometown of Somerville, Tennessee. That's Angie and John Sanders. And they've wanted solar, but they didn't know how to go about getting it. So I told them about what was up and, hey, make it easy. Okay. And then shifting gears to solar, those are some guys that run an express lube shop and car, looks like a used car shop. It's just a garage down in Nashville, Georgia, but they do a lot of good. That thing that they're spinning right now is where they're getting ready to pick a winner in the community. They support the local people in their community. So not having an electricity bill and possibly being able to earn even more from the batteries they have installed when the VPP programs come online is going to allow them to do more for their community as well. So, and through this, we've hired electricians in these places that where jobs aren't available and taught them how to do these projects. Deb Lockard is a tomato farmer and just an awesome lady, makes the best praline cookies you've ever had in your life, brings them to the farmer's market sometimes. She's like somebody needs to fill up her project. And the Countryside Solar Portfolio, this is a whole bunch of the other projects that are coming down the pipeline. It's just in a big bucket. And as they're approved officially, we'll put them in there. But we have a couple ready to go right now. So thank y'all for being on here. Will, thank you for having me. Are there any other slides I'm supposed to talk about?
I think that's it, Lester. Thank you for such a, just great informational section on that, and for speaking to the individuals in the community whose projects you're supporting. I mean, that's, a big part of, the impact we look to bring through the platform. So yeah, Josh, you want to shift gears now over to the AD folks? Brian, you want to give us an introduction of yourself, please? Oh, you're on mute.
Had a nickel for that. Every time I did that, I'd be rich. Brian Kuhn, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and thank you, Climatize, for all the work you've done. Background here is basically mechanical engineering business background going back into the 70s, and renewables has always been my passion. And one of the problems that we've always faced in this industry is, getting the right kind of financing for distributed generation sources. And Lester was absolutely right. It's a bit of a special asset class, so to speak, that is developed in real estate. A lot of it mimics income properties, but it was new enough to people, and a lot of the traditional sources didn't lend on it. So a lot of these distributed generation projects really went wanting for distributed funding is really what it came down to. And Climatize is a group that puts that together. So it's fitting a niche for us. We work across the country on commercial and industrial projects, megawatt size, 200 kilowatt size, large wind projects. It really doesn't matter. But, when you've got a real big project, then everybody's willing, and everybody wants to really come in and say, hey, I want a piece of that, and I'll offer the financing for it. But when you have the smaller projects, we needed more of a small d democratic type of approach to funding, and Climatize is starting to fill that niche. So that's what I would say about it to begin with. Larry?
All right, I guess I'm up. I'm actually kind of new to this field. I've just been doing this for several years. By profession and training, I'm a physician. I'm a radiologist, and I was looking at just as an investment into renewable energy projects. And what I discovered was that, the funding, the financing portion was really the hardest part of it. And it's just like what Lester has talked about, what Brian has talked about. If you think of investing into this area, it's three different buckets. You have early stage development, you have construction financing, and at the end you have debt. Well, each of those areas need to be refinanced to some degree. And so we started off by producing or financing 3 projects. And we found that at the end, after we had produced and developed all these projects and installed it, the biggest issue was just getting financing. You go to traditional banks, you go to even the larger Wall Street and such like that. Nobody really wanted to touch us. And so that was really the hardest part when it came to financing. And so when we met Will and Climatize, it was really a huge benefit because now, after we've gone ahead and done those 3 projects, we can refinance it. But more importantly, we can put that money back in and apply for the next projects. So that's what we've done with the money that you guys have helped us raise. We found that at the end in the last year and a half.
Brian, do you want to speak a little bit to AED and the mission that you all have been on? Oh, you're on mute again. 10 cents.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned a little bit. We're associated with another manufacturing company that does wind turbines. So we do wind and solar projects. We get involved with storage projects as well. We're even into taking the renewable energy now and making renewable fuels out of it, anhydrous ammonia, hydrogen, and that sort of thing. So we're pretty well spread around in the industry around North America. And if you're going to be in this business and be able to actually produce projects, again, it's just like the real estate business. You can't be a real estate developer or build apartment buildings or strip centers or whatever unless you have the right funding for the projects. And until now, it's only been specialty type of funding that's been available. And I think now that Climatize has hit their mark, but the industry also is starting to mature a whole lot more. And I think you're starting to see risks coming down. I think you're starting to see opportunities be advanced for Brightfields projects, solar, solar community solar projects and others. And as that financing really becomes more available to people, you're going to start to see more and more of these projects come in. This is some of the kind of projects that we get involved with. Here is a little ground-mounted 60 kilowatt array over in Freetown, Massachusetts. That energy goes into the grid, and we make money from selling the SRECs on it. We actually pay a land lease to somebody there. We've got several other large rooftop projects. These are all about 600 to 300 kilowatt sizes. Most of these are producing power for the facility itself. In some cases, they're exporting power. That Plymouth project feeds a community solar system where power is actually sent, and metering credits are sent to people all around town. So this is the kind of project we're into.
Larry, do you want to speak to kind of a little bit about your early journey? You were some of the first 3 projects on Climatize. So yeah, we'd love it if you'd share.
Yeah, we're the officially first 3. Well, like what I was talking about earlier, the biggest issue is that once you get to a certain point, we had actually invested about 1.6, almost $2 million from our family money into these projects. And you get to a certain point where you go, well, how do we secure financing? So, we went to our banks, we went to, local lenders, people that we have great relationships with, and majority of the banks just don't understand solar. They think of solar as being residential, which is great, but that's not what we're doing. They didn't really understand how to securitize it. They didn't know how to move the projects forward. So one of the biggest challenges was just be able to say, hey, how can we finance this to get to the point where we can refinance and then create more projects? So, with that said, Climatize has really helped us quite a bit with that. Now we have more projects within batteries. We're doing a lot more community solar projects. So it's really allowing that flywheel effect, if you may, to continue the projects going and further development.
I would add to that a little bit. Climatize, what it's doing is allowing us to turn over the funds that are required for the different projects. as investors come in on a project, that money then gets freed up that we've used to develop the project to develop other projects. So that's one of the biggest benefits that we can get here now.
Great, thanks. And yeah, you want to shift to the next slide here? So yeah, here are a couple of the projects that were brought onto the Climatize platform with AED. And Larry, Brian, do you guys want to speak to these at all?
Yeah, those are our babies. Those are our first three right there. Thanks to the group to help us finance this. But all three are running well, and we're producing energy and power for the communities. And so they're doing fantastic. So thank you so much for help.
Yes, of course. It's been our pleasure. So yeah, I can kind of speak through. We've done a number of different iterations with the developers on the call here. So, ultimately how these projects are able to return capital back to investors ranges through kind of a standard power purchase agreement through the sale of the electricity to an off-taker. From that, they can monetize the sunlight to electricity. Additionally, there are the federal tax credits. There's the 30% base credit, and then there are also adders that can be stacked, everything from low-income communities, energy communities, domestic content, and that can be actually up to 70% of a project's total value. Additionally, there are state incentives. For example, the community solar project that Larry mentioned in Massachusetts, they had the Massachusetts Smart adder that I believe was 17 cents per kilowatt hour given the low income off takers. There are federal grants like Lester and Nova Nova are working with that can help recapitalize the initial investment upon the project being completed. And then also there's the opportunity for the developers at an aggregate scale to pool all of these projects and refinance them together, which can, either provide repayment back to the original creditors investing through Climatize, and bring them potentially down to, different rates. So there's kind of the immediate 5 different cash flow streams that we've been working with for these clean energy projects. Well, great. I hope that provided an opportunity to hear directly from the project developers as to how, using Climatize has helped them catalyze new clean energy projects within communities across America. Climatize is available on both iOS platforms and now recently on Android as well. In the coming months, we will be launching on a web platform as well, so making it that much more accessible to everyone, regardless of mobile platform. And so, yeah, now we'll shift this over into a Q&A so that everybody has an opportunity to ask the developers about their projects. I see we're also getting some questions streaming in the Q&A. So first question in here was actually more towards us in Climatize. So do we eventually see ourselves financing other types of carbon avoidance projects as well beyond solar, so nature-based solutions or carbon removal projects? At the moment, we've been focused on really hard infrastructure projects. That being, we like to see a physical product or a new project out in the wild that's actually, then putting clean electrons into the grid. Given my renewable energy engineering background and my team's renewable energy engineering background, that's really our focus for the time being. In the future, we do plan on expanding into other horizontal asset classes, energy efficiency, EV charging, for example. Carbon credits are a world that, we have explored a little bit, but have yet to really immediately make moves on. And so I wouldn't count it out entirely. However, our focus has been on clean energy so far. Brian, Larry, do you guys want to explain kind of how you both work with AED?
So Brian is the founder of AED, and so I'm actually associated with them. I'm partnered with them for projects. They help me with some of the due diligence. They bring some of the projects up to me to get financing. So I'm more the financing guy. A lot of these projects are actually separate and owned separately through my own companies, but we work closely together for due diligence. We work closely together for some development for some projects.
Yeah. Larry's right. I'm the CEO, and I'm one of the principal owners of AED itself.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Okay. Josh, you want to bring up the next question here? So does the cost of the project also include the cost of ongoing maintenance and equipment? Why don't we start? Lester, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah,
And then
I want to start by plugging solar equipment, first of all, is that one of the reasons why solar is inevitable as our major generation source of power is because they just work. The first commercially created solar panels ever from 1954 in Bell Labs, they still work. There's some in Germany that have been around for like 40 years, still clipping at like 90%. The warranties are like 80%. The inverters are going to break about once a decade. Minor maintenance. As more and more electricians and people learn how to actually do solar, the cost of actually doing the work is going to go down. The parts go down. So I say all that to say that it matters a lot in maintenance if you're taking care. We had somebody yesterday, a chicken farmer who had an inspector coming by today, and we installed his project 2 weeks ago, and it was flickering, which to us, that's pretty easy. It's a loose wire. After we troubleshot for about 30 minutes, and then my partner drove down on Sunday evening because it wasn't an option to not do that, to get the plant functioning as properly as it could be. But there's always a loose wire to take care of. So what that really comes down to is your local electricians. Do you have people who can do the work? Do you have people at your company who can coach them through the work? And to speak directly to the price, for our project, the way that we handle maintenance is this. Very simple. What's unique is that our maintenance contract says, in exchange for allowing us to be the broker of your energy, your on-demand energy from your batteries with your utility company, which allows us to go and form a relationship with the cooperative to supply on-demand energy, which is very valuable, then we will keep your plant for 20 years. And really, it's going to end up being lifetime. For 20 years, we pay for anything that breaks, including the labor, because our incentives are aligned to make sure that it's worth it to us and to them, because we're not thinking about selling a power. We're not thinking about selling some solar to someone. We're thinking about installing a power plant, the ramifications that has to everybody involved. And because of that, at scale, we have to think more like a utility company. So whatever maintenance is needed from us is there. And I'm sure AED, that whatever their contract says, it really just comes down to, do you care about your customers? But I'll let them speak to it. There's tons of warranties, but really your warranty is only as good as the person that actually did the construction for your project.
Yeah, I would agree with that. On our side, I know every one of our projects is monitored by our network operations center here in Boston. We have a good view as to what the production rates are. We can compare them to what was projected. But we stay with the project for the long term, because that's also how we make our money. Is that we don't just sell a project to somebody and walk away. We're operating that project over the long term. So the net operating income is really what we have to live on. Okay, so we make sure that these projects are all taken care of well, that we dispatch out whenever there's a problem, that's so that it's back up and running. Problems do pop up occasionally. You get everything from squirrels chewing through wires to circuit breakers tripping off here and there. So, but it's usually a pretty minor occurrence, and we just have to dispatch out crews when we need to. But the cost of that is all absorbed in the pro forma operating income, if you will, of the project, so that the returns that investors are making have that taken into account.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to add to that as well, that we do pay insurance for all the equipment and such. So besides paying for the maintenance and having that covered, we have insurance by a national insurance company to cover all of our equipment. So if there's anything that's very destructive, a big weather event or something of that nature, the insurance does cover that.
Yeah, and for our projects, since they're all owned by the property owner, their property owner's insurance covers that stuff.
Wow, yeah. A little bit different.
Yeah. I think it's also worth mentioning that, unlike, say, commercial real estate, also where, no one really guarantees the functionality or performance or upkeep of your house, many of the solar equipment, the panels themselves have the 20-year, 80% warranty in terms of production. And so, you actually do have then, manufacturer guarantees on the performance of that equipment over its life cycle.
Yep.
Great. Then we want to shift questions here. So with extreme weather being more prevalent, is the installed equipment hardened for such changes?
I think most of that is marketing. I have a buddy down in Texas who swears that there's a certain type of panel that's better against, and I'm sure there's stuff, but it's all spec sheets. You look at it, what's the hail rating, what's the wind rating, what are the temperature ratings? Like, it's all on there. It varies a little bit from manufacturer to manufacturer. But the good news is about the only thing that's going to hurt a solar installation once it's installed is maybe hail that exists of the size that we have not seen yet as the climate becomes more chaotic. I've thought through that. But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence with even giant hailstorms in Colorado where there's a community whose roofs have been destroyed. And, and right next door, there's a solar field and there's one solar panel broken out of 100,000. Another anecdotal story just from one of our customers in South Dakota, had a hailstorm, destroyed his roof, didn't hurt his solar panels. So with his extra insurance money for not having to replace that part of his roof, they put some extra solar panels on because it's like a hard hat for roofs. Like, if anything, solar will be bad for roofing companies. But when it comes to extreme weather, even if all the panels get knocked out, covered by insurance, easiest part to replace is the panels themselves. It's all the wiring and everything else that actually makes a solar job complicated and therefore valuable. But the panels are $100, $200 pop, maybe 300 if you get some really good ones. Are not expensive to replace.
I would add to that and just say that 10, 15 years ago, if you tried to do solar, the codes and the regulations from town to town, zoning ordinances, etc., were very loosey-goosey. Nobody understood what to apply to a project. Nowadays, the code enforcement, the regulations that we have to live by, it's very cut and dry. It's very well monitored. The code officials, people having jurisdiction, know what codes to apply to different projects. And most of those officials, if they're in an area where, for example, let's say it's a coastal area where you've got a higher wind load, they make us live to a higher standard, and we have to do that in the design of the system when it's going in. So yeah, some of these codes are getting strengthened, if you will, by more extreme weather, and the industry will just have to live up to that.
Mm-hmm.
One of our Florida customers had their water softener system blown off the side of their house in a hurricane a year and a half ago, and their solar was fine on their roof. It's well engineered.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you for answering those questions. Does anybody else in the audience have anything that they would like answered?
But ultimately, if we don't get enough solar up, there's probably no equipment in the world robust enough to handle the storms that are coming. So.
Well, what a somber note to end on. Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. That's a good reminder for everybody here. So yeah, thank you all for coming to join this webinar and for taking the time out of your day to, hear from the developers of the projects on Climatize and to be able to, actually hear, from their own mouths the impact of the money that you've all invested into these projects so far. So thank you all for coming. I encourage you to check out Climatize and, continue to learn more about our work. And, we're always an email away if you have any more questions after the fact. So thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for great work.